What's up, guys? It's Toad. Black Friday. We're gonna have two plays, one in the NHL, one in the NBA, that I think are both letdown spots. There are a few other leans, I guess I would say. There is college basketball slate today as well, though I'm still not jumping in on that, even though I'm 2-1 in college basketball this season. But I've been very picky about where I want to jump in, and I tend to avoid these early season tournament scenarios. There are a couple of scenarios that might be like okay to look at, which I'll mention. Took yesterday off, although my pick'em pools are not looking good right now. The NFL, man, just totally awful. I don't know what else to say about that. Detroit, they were just committing too many mistakes. That was just awful. The Washington football team scenario, football team, they, the Washington something, whatever's. They were within 4 with like 30 seconds left in the third quarter. So you're thinking like they're hanging in this game. Like they could cover this huge number, 13 and a half or whatever, right? When you're down 4 with 30 seconds left in the third quarter. No, Dallas gets a touchdown to close the third quarter, and then they outscore them 25-0 in the fourth quarter, including a pick six. So it winds up being a 35-point Dallas win, even though it was a 4-point game, like 19 minutes a game, 15 minutes of game time before that, basically. It's like, I don't know how that's even possible. And looking at that game statistically, it was fairly close. Dallas outplayed them like slightly, I would say. That was just ridiculous. And then, yeah, San Francisco dominated Seattle. Seattle had no chance in that game, really. That was just, it was shocking how bad Seattle was, especially in the first half of that game. They almost were still able to get within the number at the end of it, but all of that just sucked. We got the weird debut Black Friday NFL game today, which as I mentioned, I lean to the Jets getting a ton of points at home. That line looks like it's gone down a little bit from 10 to 9, 9.5, something in that range. So that's certainly still the way I lean there. I mean, you're the better defense. You're getting a ton of points at home there. So that's obviously the way I continue to lean in that one. And college football, because it is that time, man. Black Friday, there's usually a decent-sized slate of college football, which there is. If you go watch my college football video, 2 of my plays are actually today. I forgot to mention. I was talking about them like they were all Saturday games, but that's not true. 2 of my plays are today, so you can go check those out. Those numbers, the Central Michigan one looks like it's kind of gone. You might still be able to get a 10 on Central Michigan. I got 11. I mean, there's not that much of a difference between those two numbers. So that's still the way I lean there. I think Nebraska, you can probably still find it less than a field goal. So still obviously like both of those leans there. All right. And then let's go to, college basketball. I can just mention a couple of things that I've noticed like really quickly while I'm in there. So obviously I noticed that Villanova and North Carolina both had a huge game yesterday. So that's one thing that I was looking at. Like, I want to kind of look to go against those teams. North Carolina's up from a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite with 97% of the cash, but 77% of the tickets against Arkansas. So this is off of, did they beat Villanova or did they lose to Villanova? I forget. They lost to Villanova by 2 in overtime yesterday in a huge matchup, huge game there. Villanova, even though they're not ranked right now, they are obviously a name team, and I think they belong in the top 25 based on my power ratings right now. That was a big game, so I tend to want to lean against North Carolina in this one. And they got, I believe they got Arkansas coming in. Yeah, and Arkansas lost to Memphis yesterday. Memphis is also a team that's kind of better than you think they are. So I just can't quite get there with it, but I do lean to the Arkansas side there just because North Carolina is coming off such a huge win over Villanova, and then Villanova is the other side of that scenario where they're actually up from a 1.5 to a 3.5 point favorite with 75% of the cash and 54% of the tickets. So it looks like the cash discrepancy and the line movement are both on the North Carolina and Villanova side, even though they're both coming off that tough game against each other. And I kind of look to go against both of them in a scenario like that. And Villanova's facing Memphis. I think the line is a bit high now on that one. I think Memphis is undervalued, like flying under the radar a little bit, even though I think Villanova is also probably undervalued because I think they should be ranked. They're a good team. Memphis is probably a team that is like kind of close to the edge of the top 25 as well, really. And Memphis is coming off that, perceived upset over Arkansas, even though I think it was a line that was close to a pick 'em. I think it might have been Arkansas 1.5 or something, or maybe Memphis was 1.5 there. I'm not even sure which one of those teams is actually better. So that game wasn't actually like an upset or anything like that. It was just kind of a close battle. But because that was like a tough game that Memphis won against a ranked team, I can't really play Memphis coming off of that. I would be more likely to play Arkansas because they lost as a ranked team to an unranked team, even though, like I said, that matchup was actually closer than that makes it look. I'd be more likely to play them against North Carolina off of that huge effort game for North Carolina. It's the way I look at those. And then I would also lean against Northern Iowa, and this is all in the battle for Atlantis in the Bahamas. They're in the lost city out there, obviously. They're out in that Bahamas tournament. Somehow all these games are in that one tournament. Northern Iowa, they were winning as a pretty big underdog yesterday in that tournament against Texas Tech. They were, I think, a 7.5 point underdog in that game, and they were blowing Texas Tech out into the second half. They were winning by double digits, and then they lost the entire lead and wound up losing right at the end, a close loss by 2. So Northern Iowa, I think it's going to be tough for them to get back up off the mat after that. So that might be the biggest go against situation on the college basketball slate there. I would lean to Stanford. Stanford's sitting still at a 5 or 5.5 point favorite, even though it looks like, well, that just changed completely. It looks like they have 80% of the tickets, but 84% of the cash is on Stanford there. Stanford, the only thing that kind of keeps me off of that is that Stanford, I believe they just played a close game in that same tournament against Michigan. And came close to beating Michigan, I think. So that's the only thing that gives me a little bit of hesitation there. But Northern Iowa, man, when you have a game like that where you almost pull off an upset against a pretty big name Texas Tech team and you had a huge lead, you had them on the ropes and you completely let that slip, I don't know how much Northern Iowa is going to have left in the tank there in that one. So I lean to Stanford in that one. I think that's probably the strongest lean on the college basketball slate, really. So not going to actually have plays there, but those are my opinions on those. And then we can go to, let's go to the NHL first here. I have one play, try to get this done, not have this go too long. I don't know if I have any other kind of leans in the NHL here. I mean, there are sort of like market indicators, but I don't know how much I could really say about many of these games because you do have teams like Minnesota, Detroit, Toronto, and Ottawa, I believe, are all coming back from Sweden. So I don't know if that's going to be like a bad travel spot, or if you might say that they're going to be undervalued now because people are going to factor in that travel spot not being good, kind of like when NFL teams come back from London or something like that. But it is kind of a return home still. So there is, in the NHL, it's kind of like a return home from a road trip, like distraction spot. And they just came home and they were dealing with family. They're dealing with like the holiday situation because Thanksgiving was yesterday. So there's that whole situation there. The Minnesota-Colorado one, I think, is a little bit interesting, maybe because you got Minnesota. They're in that travel spot where they're coming home from losing every game there in Sweden, and now they come back and they have to face a good team in the Colorado Avalanche. And the Colorado Avalanche just beat the Vancouver Canucks, which was a big win for them. So negatives all around there. Negatives on both sides there, in my opinion. So that's tough to read. Like I was looking like maybe I'm going to go against one of those teams, but I can say Colorado's down from a -143 money line favorite to a -127 money line favorite there. So, but both teams in bad spots there. And getting to the actual play that I'm on, though, is I'm fading the Dallas Stars here, even though it looks like they've gone up from -164 money line favorite to -175 money line favorite. They got 99% of the cash, but 89% of tickets. So it looks like they have the cash discrepancy on the Dallas Stars, and they've moved up on the money line. But I really don't think that I buy much of that. I don't think I buy it. I think Dallas is in a bad spot here. I am on Calgary here, +150. I'm back to the well on the Calgary Flames, who have not treated me that well. I think they've won one of the games that I've been on with them, but this is just a kind of classic letdown spot, I would say, for the Dallas Stars here, or hangover spot, really. They're coming off a slew of big games, even though the first one of those three back on the 18th, they lost. These are all at home too. They lost pretty badly to Colorado, even though it's still a big game against Colorado. Big team coming into your house. They lost 6-3. Then they beat the Rangers 6-3, who came into their house. And the Rangers, obviously, we know they're a good team. They've been playing really well. Then they had probably the biggest of these three, even though I don't think it's a divisional game for Dallas. It's a huge Western Conference matchup against Vegas, and it went into overtime 2 days ago, and they wound up losing 2-1 to Vegas in a huge battle there. Big game. That's a big game. Now they have Calgary coming in, a team with a losing record when you're coming off that really tough overtime loss to Vegas, and you have Winnipeg up next on the road there. So I think that might wind up being a return home spot for Winnipeg. I'm not totally sure about that because they're on the road right now. But Winnipeg, they're a team that has a nice winning record right now, and they're in Dallas's division. So I think this is a sandwich spot because you just played Vegas, who are the returning champs, at home, had a really close overtime game, max effort. Now you got a losing record team that's kind of rebuilding and whatever, and Calgary coming in, and you got Winnipeg, who's right behind you in the division, in the standings now because of the way they've been playing. Up next, that's a big game. You could overlook Calgary, man. So that's what I'm doing. I think that's what I'm going with. I think it's a sandwich spot for the Dallas Stars there. Calgary, they're in the middle of a road trip. They didn't play well in their last game. They lost to Nashville. I thought that was a bad spot for Calgary in a way because it was kind of sandwiched in between an overtime game against Seattle, who was a playoff team last year. So that's a pretty big win going into overtime at Seattle. Big effort game there. And they had Dallas, Colorado, Vegas, Dallas, Vancouver, Minnesota, Carolina, New Jersey, Colorado, Vegas, Minnesota, Tampa, Florida, Anaheim, LA, all these bigger games up next after the Nashville game. So they let the Nashville game slip, unfortunately, for Calgary there. Yeah, I think they were kind of in a bad spot there, in a sandwich spot. It was the one losing record opponent that they have in this whole set of games that are coming up, really a gauntlet that they have coming up. But I think that's going to cause them to refocus, coming off a bad game, going into Dallas. I think they're going to want to perform well there. That's the way I look there. We're on the Calgary Flames, plus, what did I say it is, 150? Something in that range. 150. All right, so that's what we're going with there. Then in the NBA, I'll just mention maybe two leans real quick. I kind of lean against the Phoenix Suns in the NBA just because they're coming off a big win over the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors have looked pretty bad recently. They've been losing a lot of games, even though some of it was without Curry still. They're a big name team. That's a big win for the Phoenix Suns. So I don't like the spot that the Suns are in. They're coming off that big win. Now they are leaving home after they've been on a big win streak, which crossed being at home and being on a 2-game road trip to Utah and then coming back home. And they won all those games, 5 wins in a row. Now they have to go out to Memphis after beating Golden State. So I think they're in a letdown spot. They have the Knicks up next, who were a playoff team last year too, although Memphis also was. But Memphis has been playing pretty badly this year. New York's been playing pretty well enough that I don't know if that would make this a sandwich spot, but I think it's certainly a letdown spot on the Phoenix Suns there after a big win over Golden State. And then Memphis, they just haven't really done much of anything right. And they're coming off one of their worst losses. Even they lost to the Rockets by 20 in Houston. But of course, that was the game where they were coming off playing Boston to within 2 at home. So Memphis, I think they were in a hangover spot there after a huge effort against the Celtics. They went out to the Rockets and they really didn't have much left in the tank there. So that kind of explains that loss. So I would only look to take the large amount of points with the Grizzlies at home there. Suns are up from 7 to 8 on the road, 98% of the cash, but 86% of the tickets. So the market kind of looks like there's cash driving the number up on the Suns. I have a little bit of hesitation there. I don't think it's the absolute strongest play here, and I'm being pretty picky, but obviously, like I said, I think they're in a letdown spot there. So I would, and the Grizzlies have to be in a bounce back spot after such an ugly loss there in the previous game. So I would only lean to taking the huge amount of points with the Grizzlies there. I also lean to the New York Knicks, and it looks like there's a lot of movement on the line, moving this up. They've gone up from a 3-point favorite to a 5.5-point favorite. I don't know if there's like an injury situation here for the Miami Heat or what's going on there, but that line is kind of out of control that it's moved up that much. And you've kind of missed some of the value there, lost some of the value on the Knicks, missing the better numbers there, but I do still lean to the Knicks side there, even though it also looks like the cash discrepancy is on the Heat. Maybe that's because the line has moved so much that there's some cash coming in on the Heat now. I don't know about that because obviously something moved the line up on the Knicks. Excuse me. But it does look like the Heat have 88% of the cash, but 68% of the tickets. So it looks like the cash discrepancy is on the Heat there. So again, maybe some buyback just because the number's gone pretty far on the Knicks there. But I like the Knicks in this one just because if you look at what they've done, the Heat just kind of look too good now. They came back home off of getting that quick zigzag, quick revenge against the Cavs there. It looks like Adebayo actually missed that game, so maybe he's out again for this game. So maybe that's why the line has moved on the Knicks to that degree because he missed the last game. But even though he missed that game, that might have been kind of injured player theory type of spot there for the Heat. They blew out the Cavs at Cleveland. They just absolutely destroyed them by 30 points. So I think now after that, you might kind of be in a letdown spot if you're Miami here. But because of that Adebayo injury situation, if he's going to still be out and it's now their second game without him, well, actually, that would put me even more on the Knicks there, I think, because then that second game without that guy, without that star player, you kind of regress a little bit. If you had such a great game without him, you kind of tend to you take your foot off the gas a little bit and get like a little bit complacent there. So if he's still out, that might be what Miami might do there. Like, we just won without him. We just destroyed Cleveland on the road without him. You might tend to ease up just a little bit there, and you just won by so much. I think you're feeling like a little bit like high and mighty there. So that's the spot that I think Miami is kind of in there. And I believe for the Knicks, this is going to be a sort of revenge spot for the Knicks. And who did the Knicks play last? I don't even know what they did. They lost to the Timberwolves. Oh, but the problem I have with the Knicks, the reason I can't get there with the Knicks actually is because this is a return home from a road trip, even though they have 3 days off. And that included the holiday, though. So it's still kind of just a typical distraction spot there with the Knicks returning home from a 5-game road trip. So that's the one thing that kind of keeps me away from actually jumping on the Knicks here. But Miami's in a letdown spot off of that big win, feeling a little bit high on themselves probably after beating Cleveland. They might be in that second game with the injured player of Adebayo still out. So I think that's a negative as well. But that is the reason why the line has gone up a bit on the Knicks, I would say, if that is the case. Knicks returning from a road trip, but they did finish the road trip with a loss, even though it was to a good Minnesota team. They lost by 17, so maybe it's a spot where they're probably going to bounce back, I would say. And I don't think this is a spot where the Knicks are going to come unfocused because there is that revenge scenario I was just alluding to. Miami is the team that ended their season last year. Miami is the team that knocked the Knicks out of the playoffs last year. So I think that is some added motivation for the Knicks because they haven't played Miami yet since then. So the last time they played them, Miami was eliminating them from the playoffs. That's one revenge spot in a sport like the NBA where I think that does actually add a little bit of motivation to the team. You know, this is that team that ended your season last year. So it's a little bit of extra motivation for the Knicks there, I would say. So I lean to the Knicks, even though you're laying kind of a huge price now at this point. It's sketchy because it's a return home from a road trip. So I almost can never play a team when they're returning from a road trip. So I just kind of stay off of it in that case, even though I do lean somewhat to the Knicks there. The play I'm actually going to be on, though, this is kind of just a classic letdown situation. Although actually, maybe I should also mention that I think Milwaukee is kind of in a bad spot as well against the Washington Wizards. They're coming off a close game against the Celtics, and they're returning home from a 2-day road trip. And this is going to be a quick revenge for the Wizards. So the spot Milwaukee is in, they played the Celtics close, but I think they might have lost Giannis. So I don't know. I don't know if I want to get involved in this. I don't know. He might be hurt. I'm not sure. But Milwaukee just played the Celtics to within 3 on the road. So that's a tough game to come off of. And the game before that, they won at Washington and won fairly easily. They won by, 13. So now they're coming home and they're laying 13 at home against the Wizards. Wizards are, of course, coming off that game that I was on the Wizards, and they still covered, but they blew actually a 19-point lead in that game against the Charlotte Hornets, which the Wizards had no excuse for not winning that game outright. But now the Wizards are in that kind of quick road reversal revenge angle where the Bucks just came into their house and beat them. But of course, you're probably going to be focused on the Bucks anyway because they're the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Bucks are coming off that tough 3-point loss to the Celtics where I think they made a comeback in that game. They were losing by more at one point, and they had a close, tough loss to the Celtics. So the only way I would lean is to the Wizards there, but it's tough to do that in a game that is just going to be kind of a mismatch in a matchup like this. The Bucks are sitting at a 13-point favorite. They got 90% of the cash, but 83% of the tickets. So I don't know. The cash discrepancy is on the Bucks a little bit, but I would only lean to the Wizards there. And it's also a return home for the Bucks, but it's a 2-game road trip. So I don't think that's like a huge factor there, really, from a small, short road trip there. But recreational bettors might also look at it and say, well, the Bucks beat the Wizards by 13 in Washington 2 games ago. So obviously they're going to blow the Wizards out here, right? So that sort of like syllogism might come into play as well. But that's the way I lean there. Getting to the actual play, though, the actual play is going to be going against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I think the Timberwolves just look too good at this point, man. Even though they are certainly good, they're sitting around a 4-point favorite, and they've actually gone up a little bit to 4 with juice at home. But I think the market indicators are against them. They have 74% of the tickets. They're definitely going to be the public team here. 56% of the cash, though. So it looks like some of the bigger bets are actually on the Kings side. Some of the bigger money is coming in on the Kings side, even though the line looks like it's ticked up on the T-Wolves a little bit. It does look like the market indicators are going against the T-Wolves, and it looks like they're the public favorite here at home, and it almost looks too good to be true, too easy. Like you're only laying 4 with the T-Wolves, so you're only getting like a little bit more than home court there. So the line is saying the T-Wolves are only slightly better than the Kings. What's up with that? Well, I think that might actually be true. The T-Wolves have looked really good to start the season. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly true. Like they've been surprisingly good, but I think the Kings might be a little bit undervalued here. They're not that bad a team. They're still a returning playoff team from last year. I think they've been underperforming a bit this year. And if anything, Minnesota's been a bit overperforming. And I think this is a letdown spot because Minnesota is coming off one game where they almost couldn't have looked better. Like they've had 2 games where they blew teams out. And even though the first one was when they blew out Denver, they've had 2 games where they've blown out really good teams. The first one was that Denver game where they destroyed Denver, the returning champs at home. And you'd think they'd be in a letdown spot coming off of that, but they stayed at home. And that was actually a bad spot, but they still actually destroyed Utah at home. They were able to beat Utah by a lot. And even though they had Boston upcoming too, and they wound up beating Boston at home too. So I don't know. They didn't suffer the sandwich spot there, even though that looked like it was a huge sandwich spot. But I think this is also a bad spot. This is a letdown spot, and this is a spot where they're coming off another big blowout win, and this one was against the Philadelphia 76ers. They handle the 76ers at home. So they're coming off of that. They beat the Knicks before that, so they took out 2 of the Eastern Conference playoff teams from last year. Now they get Sacramento coming in, who's been struggling a bit, and they're laying a price that looks way too easy to take Minnesota at home. They do have Memphis up next, but I don't think that's much of a look ahead at this point, even though last year I would have said, yeah, this is like a sandwich spot because Memphis was a playoff team last year, but nobody's paying attention to Memphis because they've been struggling so badly this year. But coming off that huge win over Philadelphia, I think it's a bad spot for Minnesota there. You're feeling high on yourselves after that win. It's a huge win. Sacramento, meanwhile, they got to turn it around. They've lost 2 in a row to the New Orleans Pelicans at home. Now they're finishing up their road trip here, a long road trip. So you might say they might be fatigued at the end of this, but also they're sitting at 3-2 on the road trip, and they've lost 2 in a row. So I think they got to be kind of in a bounce back situation. Minnesota is playing so well. They're not a team you're going to overlook. You're going to go into their house and you're going to want to perform, I would have to say. Sacramento did win at Dallas and at the Lakers on this road trip. So it's not like they can't compete against some of these better teams. And then after the Dallas win, I went against them because I thought they were in a letdown spot, and it was a tough spot because it was a back-to-back, and it was a third game in 4, a fourth game in 6, I think, or maybe in 7, no, in 6, all in different cities. So that was a tough spot, and they got blown out by the Pelicans. But then I thought they were in the nice spot to bounce back, the zigzag spot against the Pelicans, and it was not to be. The Pelicans handled them again in that game, which is kind of crazy. I don't know how Sacramento dropped that game, but now after a couple of not very good performances in a row, I think you're going to be in the spot where you're undervalued and you're in a bounce back spot there. So those are my thoughts there. Those are the 2 plays that I got. In the NHL, we are on the Calgary Flames plus 150, and in the NBA, we're on the Sacramento Kings plus 4. Gave out some extra leans there. Hopefully we continue this nice run that we're on, man. This is we've been pretty hot, so hopefully that continues. Hopefully I'm still reading the market and the situations well here, and enjoy everything that's up on tap today, man. And check out my college football and NFL videos because I got plays in there. None of them have happened yet. 2 of the college ones are today. Check it out, man. Have a good day. Peace.